V has come too.
Hacking in video games have always been average. Never really terrible, but not exactly great either. It's a feature that's so common, varies wildly from game to game, and yet it's kinda unremarkable when you think about it. For example, when people talk about Mass Effect, they talk about the characters, the worlds you go to, the story, how much the Mako sucked. But nobody ever really talks about the Frogger minigame that you had to play to open up a locker. A lot of this is because hacking is never really the focus, and often optional, since players either A, don't have to use it, or B, can cheese through it easily with in-game upgrades. It's really difficult for developers to provide a truly engaging hacking experience that challenges the player and leaves a lasting impression. But what if we had a game that was all about hacking? Uplink is a hacking simulator developed by Introversion Software, released in 2001 exclusively for PC. Introversion are best known today for DEF CON, Darwinia, and Prison Architect, but Uplink was their very first game, and it was also their very first success. The earliest ideas for Uplink began in the mid to late 90s when its lead designer Chris DeLay was still a computer science undergrad at the Imperial College London. In a retrospective interview with PC Gamer UK, DeLay had stated that it was going to be like Frontier Elite 2, in which you fly a spaceship around and visit starports and upgrade. I wanted to do that, but in the online world. As is pretty typical in games development, his grander vision for Uplink would get scaled down tremendously over time, but what didn't get changed was the focus on hacking and its influences from Hollywood movies and TV shows. Depending on your knowledge of computers, Hollywood hacking can either look really convincing or really silly. Fictional depictions of computer and entertainment are rarely accurate, and even the most grounded and realistic examples still take a few liberties. But the truth is, real hacking is complicated, hard to explain, boring as hell, and none of that really makes for good entertainment, or makes sense to the 50-plus-year-olds writing the scripts. So as a result, we kinda get stuff like this.
This computer, the entire NCIS network is next.
I can't stop him. Do something, McGee.
I've never seen code like this.
But in a weird sort of way, Hollywood hacking, when done right, so to speak, can still look really cool, and I think that was the kind of fantasy DeLay wanted to bring to video games. Chris DeLay would eventually recruit his college friends Mark Morris and Thomas Arundel, and the trio would invest £200 each to form what would eventually become Introversion Software, which was more or less based out of DeLay's home at the time. Despite Mark and Tom's involvement, Uplink was entirely developed and designed by Chris, who did pretty much everything except for the music. Booting the game for the first time brings you immediately to the initiation process. You are an agent for the Uplink Corporation, a broker firm that serves as the liaison between freelance hackers and clients needing certain jobs done. This initiation also sets the general mood going forward, basically the fact that this isn't a typical video game, for lack of better phrasing. Uplink immerses you into its world by blurring the line between video game-isms and reality. You aren't really playing as a character in Uplink's world, but instead, Uplink is in our world. The software you're running isn't really the game, but a method of connecting to your gateway machine hidden away somewhere around the world. Starting the game up requires you to log in with your username and password. You can contact clients for intel on a target or negotiate prices, or read current events in the tech world to find out what companies and organizations you may or may not have affected. Events of the game happen in real time, as in 1 second is 1 second real time, and not video game logic 10 minutes of gameplay is an hour real time. But if you think that something will take too long, you can always speed it up, or just let Uplink run in the background while you just go off and do something else. Though it is worth pointing out that time only really progresses when Uplink is actually running. I wouldn't say that the game breaks the fourth wall, because I feel that that would require it to acknowledge that it's a video game in the first place. Now, I guess this probably does sound really confusing, but the best way I can put it is that it's like Superhot or the early Command & Conquer games in terms of meta subtlety. Instead of being meta by constantly winking and nudging at the player with silly jokes, it takes its setting very seriously. It talks directly to the player and not a character, and it gives the implication that what you're doing is having real effects in the real world somewhere somehow. Just like the other games, Uplink encourages you to suspend your disbelief just enough to get you into fulfilling your role. In this case, the role of an elite criminal hacker. There are no 3D models or 2D sprites, no fancy levels, no health bars, or any of the stuff that you would expect from a normal video game. Uplink trades all of that for menus and pop-ups set up to simulate the experience of using a computer. It's both very minimalistic and incredibly stylish at the same time. And speaking of style, this is a very early 2000s game. Not really in how it's played, but in the general vibe and aesthetic that it gives off. The user interface is a monochrome sea of blue and black, but not too far off design-wise from other popular operating systems of that era. There's mods out there that change the UI, but I only really found one that I actually liked and could use, and it's one that uses icons from Windows 2000. The soundtrack, if you even want to call it that, is only 4 songs, but it's 4 really great tracks that I think really nail that element of cyber cool TM without being too overly stereotypical. You know the kind.
Manipulate scientific data.
All of this stuff probably makes the game feel just a bit outdated, but not so much that it becomes jarring or immersion breaking. And since I have a lot of nostalgia for the Y2K era, the outdated bits, like the Windows 98 logo in the beginning and the dial-up sound effects throughout, they're a lot more charming for me than a detriment. There's also the Uplink OS mod that completely overhauls the UI to something a lot more flashy and modern, if that's, what you're looking for, though I was never able to get it to work. So, what's the gameplay like? Well, as I said before, Uplink is all menus and pop-ups, to the point where you could probably play the game with just a mouse and be fine. Since you're basically a freelancer, you have to pick up jobs as they come in from the listing board. There's no strict mission-to-mission structure here. You move at your own pace and take whatever job that you prefer, if you've got the skill to pull it off, and a high enough ranking. The average gameplay loop follows a pattern like this. Take the offer, break into the target, do the job, cover your tracks, tell the client your work's done, get the money, wash, rinse, repeat. Money can be used to buy extra programs, upgrade existing ones, or purchase and upgrade your gateway machine for better performance, which will be necessary as you move up the ladder. Completing missions successfully increases your agent ranking, which lets you take up more difficult jobs, and your neuromancer rating, which is a sort of weird morality system. The latter metric, which is a blatant reference to the book of the same name, measures your unofficial standing with the hacker community. Taking jobs that go after large companies increases it positively, while taking jobs that affect individual people, screw over contracts, or going after other hackers decreases it negatively. This doesn't really seem like it has any real effect in the game, but I guess it's a nice way to track how much of a bastard you really are. Your weapons of choice are the various programs loaded onto your machine. Since every job will have different requirements and security measures, it's up to you to pick the right tool for the job. The strange thing though about Uplink is that its gameplay is very simple, which makes it hard for me to talk about in depth, There's no crazy mechanics or hidden strats to learn to get by, or at least none that the game wouldn't tell you already. And the programs themselves are automated, which leaves you to only worry about making sure that they do their job in time. However, it's deceptively simple, as the real challenge comes not from doing your tasks right, but from not getting caught. Once you break into the target, a trace to your position begins immediately, and just like in the movies, it becomes a race against the clock to make a clean getaway. You can increase the amount of time it takes by bouncing your connection around the world to different points, but it creates one major problem. Even if you do get away cleanly, there is a soft trace done after the fact to track you down. Connecting to loads of different nodes around the world leaves behind logs on each machine that can be traced back to you. So it's important to not just cover your tracks on the target machine, but also on the nodes that you used. Luckily, you don't have to wipe every single node, just a few to break the chain. And if you do get caught, well, game over. Kind of. The feds end up seizing your machine, the Uplink Corporation officially disavows your existence, and your account and any assets that you earned are swiftly taken away. The game over screen, if you want to call it that, shows you metrics the game was tracking behind the scenes, such as your score, a neuromancy rating, and how many lives you ruined. But this isn't really the end, as you can jump back in and make a new account. You'll have to climb your way back up the ladder, but hopefully with all that new experience, the climb won't be nearly as long. Uplink in fact does actually have a story to it, but I didn't really progress enough to finish it, and it's actually entirely optional to the experience, so I won't cover it in this video. But due to the overall open-endedness of the game, you'll end up making your own mini-stories as you play. My favorite moment in the game was when I received the job to falsify some dude's academic records, so he can be placed with a higher class degree. However, a few days in-game later, I got another job from a group of college students who felt that their friend was a bit overrated and didn't deserve the degree that he got. The target? Well, it was the same dude that I forged a record for. I get the feeling that this might have been coincidental, but whatever. I thought it was pretty funny, and I'm sure that the developers hoped that little moments like this would happen for the players. Introversion to this day has never made a follow-up, but you can see how Uplink's design laid the groundwork for their later projects. The high-tech and simplistic blue, black, and white interfaces and drawing inspiration from movies can be seen in their games like Defcon and Subversion, which is unfortunately indefinitely on hold forever. Uplink is definitely a product of its time, from when the internet was still relatively new and computers were hulking beige rectangles. But we live in a world where cybersecurity has become an even bigger issue than it was in 2001, where massive corporate breaches, hacker organizations backed by world superpowers, and computer viruses causing havoc on a global scale are kind of the norm. So in a way, Uplink was both a product of its time, but also ahead of the curve.